What's up, guys? Spider here, and we finally defeated the super Easter egg boss, Mephistopheles, and let's just say he was quite the piatch. This is a full strategy guide to defeat him, and we should probably know. We've been through most of the fight many times. To begin with, Mephisto, we're going to call him that for short, starts off the fight with 3 types of attacks, and after each of the first 4 phases, he gains a new one. Each of these attacks is telegraphed by him, some more than others. Now, before we get to the attacks, he does have a base ability to raise zombies from the ground. He'll telegraph this by raising one hand into the air, and you'll get a varied number of skeletons that rise out of the ground. It could be 2 skeletons, it could be 10 skeletons, and it's also dependent on the number of players you have in the game. The 3 types of attacks he usually begins with are Fireball, Flame Breath, and Black Hole. There's very little warning for the Fireball attack, so you really need to be on your toes to avoid it. He'll raise up his hand and then rain them down very quickly, so it's not typically an attack you can call out to your teammates. Plus, he can run this attack while moving from side to side, where generally we won't see him use any of his other attacks while moving, and it typically will take 2 or 3 of those fireballs. If they hit you, you are downed. His Flame Breath, which we just saw, is preceded by him blowing a little fire out of his mouth. He then proceeds to blow flames down a direct path from his starting point across the map in the exact direction he's facing. So it could slice the map in half, it could slice it, you know, in 2/3 and a third. It depends on which way he's facing at the time. It has limited width, and combined with the telegraph, it's fairly simple to avoid, and the flames don't last very long. His third attack, Black Hole, is preceded by him raising a mini black hole into the air with a single hand. You do have a few seconds prior to the black hole appearing in the middle of the map to get to cover and or to prepare for its effects. The black hole will suck you in and down you instantly. The farther away you are, the better, and taking cover behind the 2 rock pillars will negate its effect completely. If you are getting sucked in, you can sprint away from it and can generally avoid it on the outskirts of the map. Keep in mind that while reviving someone, the effects of the black hole are negated. Also, if you go prone prior to the black hole appearing on the map, you can also avoid its effects. Generally speaking, Mephisto will pause briefly between attacks, but we have seen him run 2 or 3 in quick succession, so be careful, particularly when trying to charge the 5th rune when he seems to attack more rapidly. So now that we talked about his attacks, what do we actually need to do in this fight, as we're showing you here? Well, there are 5 glowing rune locations in the map that encircle the middle of the map. You activate a rune by holding square to place a talisman on it. Only 1 talisman can be placed at a time. You then need someone to stand inside the glowing circular area of the rune for a set period of time in order to charge it. You don't have to get kills, it's just a simple matter of time for being inside that area. You can step off the rune to evade Mephisto's attacks or the skeletons, but only for a brief period of time. If you're off the rune for too long, it will reset, and you'll need to restart the rune by replacing the talisman. So let's talk strategy. Rule of thumb, if you're not running solo, stay separated. When Mephisto attacks, you do not want 2 players going down at the same time. Solo strategy is fairly obvious. Charge the runes and avoid his attacks and the skeletons. With 2 players, have 1 player only run the runes, and the second running at the rock pillars. Ideally, the one farthest away from the player charging the rune to maintain separation. With 3 players, the 3rd runs at the 2nd rock pillar. With 4 players, I would suggest the 4th one run in one of the 2 open areas, whichever one is farthest from the player running the rune. Depending on which rune is being charged, this means player 4 would need to change positions between the 2 open areas. While the runes can charge faster when more than 1 player is on them, I don't recommend this, as it simply increases the possibility of multiple players getting downed. However, as you gain better knowledge of Mephisto's attacks and movements, you can time it to have multiple players charging for brief periods of time. I would still suggest, though, that while charging the 5th rune, you don't attempt this, since Mephisto's attacks seem to become more frequent. So once the rune is fully charged, blue ghosts will start floating around the map. You'll need to use your entangler to grab a ghost and then shoot them at Mephisto. You'll need to do this multiple times, I think around 5 or 6, I'm not entirely sure, in order to bring Mephisto into the middle of the map so we can directly attack him. Strategy-wise, I would recommend the same player in your team both charge the runes and shoot the ghosts at Mephisto. The other players are simply there for support to deal with adds, call out Mephisto's attacks, and to revive teammates during the rune charge and entangler phases of the fight. This strategy dictates also which weapon selection to a degree. In our case, Hypermole ran the runes and ghosts. He ran with Kendal's and the Venom Z to deal with spawns during the next part of each rune cycle that we haven't talked about yet. For the support players, I would suggest Kendal's at the very least. Ideally, the Dominion variant, giving you stockpile with increased ammo, and combined with a selection of other weapons. I don't recommend running a third weapon in the Mule Munchie slot, but you can if you wish. If you get down, you lose it anyway, and it just seems to get out of the way in the way of switching weapons. We actually got into the habit of getting rid of our Mule Munchies perk just to avoid that, having to cycle through that third weapon to get to the weapons that we really wanted. First recommendation for a secondary weapon is the FHR-40. It's got a great rate of fire, decent ammo, and actually fires multiple bullets at a time. Ideally, you've got the Windfall variant unlocked via the JTF mission team that gives you Invigorate. Killing an enemy refills a portion of your health, plus stockpile with increased ammo. Second recommendation is the Reaver shotgun with either the Toro or Machete variant, giving you stockpile again. It's a great adds clearing shotgun, but you definitely won't have the range the FHR or Kendal's will give you. But having the Kendal's for range support is fine as backup. You simply need to manage your ammo. Third recommended secondary weapon is the Type 2 Butcher variant, simply for the 87 perk. Alternate mode now fires as akimbo shotguns. You still have the downfall the same as the Reaver, but you got two akimbo shotguns. Come on. Fantastic. Another great weapon is the Mauler Sentinel variant, giving you Slicer. Fires a vertical column of bullets with each shot at the cost of fire rate, as well as haste, slightly increased movement speed. This LMG will wreck nearly anything in your path, particularly mammoths. The only other weapon I would recommend is the VPR, which is a wall buy in the theater. It also fires multiple bullets at a time, similar to the FHR. The only problem with the VPR is that it seems to be a bit broken, recharging your Fate and Fortune meter. I don't know if you guys have witnessed this. I'm not sure what it is, but my F&F meter would always charge extremely slowly when using the VPR. I don't know. Perhaps it's glitched. Outside of the FHR and the Reaver, though, I wouldn't recommend running the other weapons mentioned if you don't have the variant types equipped. So now that we've fully completed 2 runes, let's talk about Mephisto's 2 additional attacks, Comet and Firewall. Mephisto telegraphs the Comet by raising a hand and throwing it toward its target. The Comet moves slowly, but it has a significant area of impact, and if you are within its blast range when it hits the map, you will be downed. It does move slowly, though, so it is mostly avoidable. His Firewall tell is kind of similar to raising the skeletons, only he will use both hands, raise them up, and then clap them together to spawn the wall. The wall starts spawning directly in front of Mephisto and crosses the map, very similar to how the Fire Breath works. Basically, whichever way he's facing, it will cross the entire map in that direction. You will be downed instantly if the wall hits you, and you may actually fall through the map. It's a bit glitched, so be careful. Keep in mind also the wall will separate players for a period of time before it despawns, and you will take fire damage if you get too close to it. So let's talk about what happens when we down Mephisto in the center of the map after the ghosts. He'll pause his attacks for a few seconds, so try and clear the remainder of the adds and prepare to unload on him, aiming for the blue glowing symbol on his body, on his chest or shoulder. He'll always fly into the center of the map the way he was facing when the final ghost hits him, so you can prepare by positioning yourself directly in front of him. It doesn't actually take that much firepower to finish him off. You'll know you're done when the symbol on him stops glowing, so make sure you stop firing so you can conserve your ammo. There are ammo drops in the center of the map, but try and only get them when players need them. And simply reduce your reliance on them by conserving ammo. Only shoot when you really need to. So once done, the final step of each rune cycle, aside from the final one, is to deal with a wave of adds that can include zombies, specials like ninjas and clowns, as well as scout cryptids, phantoms, mammoths, which come out after the 4th rune, and slashers come out after the 2nd, and I'm not sure if they came out after the 3rd. The player running the runes really comes into play here for dealing with the adds, especially the slashers, by using the Venom Z. This is why we recommend this player running the Kendal's and Venom Z, since they won't be the main player dealing with adds and won't need as much ammo as the other support players. So following each wave of adds, Mephisto will perform an additional comet attack. These comets are not nearly as large as his regular comet attack, but there are many of them. You can easily avoid them by hiding behind the 2 rock pillars. You may still take some damage and even get red screen, but the possibility of getting downed is remote, I think. I don't think we've ever gotten down because of these comets. Simply stay behind cover until the comets stop raining down. Mephisto will then run his new unlocked attack. This next attack is what we call the Center Slam. Keep in mind that all the attacks we've discussed thus far, including this one, may not spawn in exactly as it did in our game. Mephisto may actually unlock his Center Slam attack after the first rune cycle, for instance. His tell for this attack is he'll begin glowing with fire profusely. It's very, very obvious. He'll then teleport into the middle of the map and will take a few seconds setting up his slam. If you aren't behind one of those rock pillars when he does so, you will get downed. He also remains in the middle for a few seconds afterward. If you're the rune runner with enough experience, you can actually time the slam in order to maximize your time on the runes. You can actually stay on the runes, while he's setting up a slam, go briefly behind the rock pillar, and then come back out immediately after. And if you watch Hyper during this gameplay, he has actually become the master or expert at timing Mephisto's Center Slam attacks. His final attack, which was always unlocked for us after the 4th rune, is the Fire Tornado. Mephisto will telegraph this by swirling one hand around in the air, spawning in a fire tornado that starts in the middle of the map, then spawns out across the map in multiple tornadoes. Just watch their path to avoid them. Having adds cleared out ahead of time definitely helps. Keep in mind that they will actually travel behind the rock pillars as well, so watch out. You're not entirely safe behind those rock pillars. One other thing we haven't discussed yet regarding player setup, before we actually get into the 5th rune and the final phase of the boss fight, is recommended fate and fortune cards, so let's do this now. My first recommended fate card is 5-second muscle. Increase damage after reloading for 5 seconds. It's a great free card, and I actually purposely use its functionality typically on the Beast from Beyond boss fight for the first 4 rhinos. I actually shoot a few rounds before the crates open, then wait until just before the lasers fire to release the rhino, then I reload, and prior to the container opening, then I just unload on the rhino, so it adds a little bit of damage. The second card I use is Best for Last. The last 4 bullets in your clip have increased damage, which, typically isn't as useful as the first one, since I usually reload prior to nearly running out of ammo, but it's definitely nice to have, particularly on the Kendalls. Not sure if it actually has an effect on the Venom Z, though. That's the only thing I'm not entirely sure about, both for the 5-second muscle as well as the Best for Last. Stimulus could be beneficial during the last phase of the boss fight. Shooting a zombie releases a healing area of effect for allies, so if everybody had it, it might actually give you some benefit in that last phase. I would save it, though, for then, because that's when you're going to need it the most. Now, getting into fortune cards, I would highly recommend every player having Rising Phoenix, of course. Not if you're running solo, obviously, but revive all down teammates. However, I would only recommend using it if multiple teammates are downed, or in the case of running it with 2 players, I would actually save it for the later stages of the boss battle, such as the 5th rune or the final phase. Because if you can't pick them up, on rune cycle number 2, then you're going to be in trouble on the 5th and then the final phase of the boss fight. Reanimated is also another card I would use on top of Rising Phoenix. Instantly self-revive after entering Last Stand. The way I used Reanimated, I didn't have any more Reanimated or Rising Phoenix cards, is saving it for after I use Rising Phoenix and then building up my meter again so I had it available. I would save it and only activated it if both Axel and Hyper were down, giving me 2 chances to revive them. So if I got down trying to revive them, I'd get Reanimated, then I can try again. Simply using it randomly I don't think is effective, because you could get downed instantly and be in a position where you could have easily been revived, and then the card's gone. So, and like I said, I didn't have any of those cards remaining, unfortunately. Another fortune card I would recommend is Evade. It allows the player to dodge. It's actually a very useful card. I use it a lot in the Beast from Beyond boss fight. But here, particularly for the Rune Runner, trying to evade Mephisto's fireball attacks. Hyper found it very, very useful here. However, the only problem with this card, it's glitched. Its duration is supposed to be 2 waves, but you'll lose it if you get downed. Unlike 5-second muscle and Best for Last, which last their, stated duration. So that card is definitely glitched. The only other fortune card that seemed a bit useful was Twist of Fate. Spawns a twister that moves around killing zombies. I believe Axel ran it once during one of our games, and it seemed, you know, at least somewhat useful on the final phase of the boss fight. So now we're on to the 5th and final rune. This is where Mephistopheles attacks seem to become more frequent, and you'll see we had quite a bit of trouble getting through it with the rune resetting multiple times. Priority is survival, guys, so if the rune resets, it resets. Don't worry about it, don't get frustrated. Just restart it when everyone's safe. The other difference with the 5th rune is that once you shoot the symbol on Mephisto enough to make it disappear when he comes into the middle of the map after the ghost phase, you then directly enter the final phase of the boss fight. So what I'm going to do, because this goes on for a bit, I'm going to let the battle play out during this 5th phase, and I'm going to get back to you guys to discuss the final phase of the boss fight as it occurs. We're here at the end of the 5th rune cycle and just finished off Mephisto's last symbol. Now the fun, the real fun begins. Mephisto's attack frequency becomes even more chaotic and random spawns will continue to occur for the remainder of the fight. This includes the possibility of slashers and mammoths spawning in, so be aware of the ads. To be honest, there were some details with this final phase of the fight that we figured out during this gameplay. So what do we need to do? All you need to do is shoot the hell out of Mephisto from anywhere on the map. You don't have to be standing on any of the runes at all. You just have to lay into him with all the firepower you can, all the while dealing with ads and avoiding his attacks. We actually tested the theory this phase was simply about survival and progression could be made simply over time, but we debunked that in the first couple minutes of this final phase. We didn't shoot Mephisto and progress was not made. So how do you tell progression? Talismans will rise up from the rune locations one at a time and will each lock in above those locations when enough damage has been dealt to Mephisto. With Kendalls, it doesn't really matter where you shoot him really, but with other weapons, shooting the glowing symbols on him seems to do the trick, or in the chest or whatever. You'll get hit markers, all right? You'll get hit markers when shooting him. This should be a sign you're good. This is where the recommended shotguns from earlier may not be so effective, and is why our first recommendation was the FHR, since you're going to typically be at range with him since he's flying around during this phase. As each talisman locks above each rune location, the next talisman will begin charging. It appeared to us that the raising of the talisman seemed to occur in the same order that we locked in each rune during the first 5 phases of the boss fight. So it's simple. Keep shooting at him until all 5 talismans have locked in, and then we have to do one more thing. Did I say you only had one more thing to do a bit earlier? You have 2 more things, okay? Once all the talismans have raised up, all you gotta do is circle around and hit all 5 of them by hitting square on each of the 5 talismans. So you gotta run a circle, hit square on every single one of them. Laser beams or fire beams will actually attach to Mephisto and bring him down into the center of the map. Once he's down there, just lay into him. Keep shooting. Do not stop shooting. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200, okay? Just keep shooting the crap out of him, and you will beat him. You will defeat him. Finally, after a lot of attempts, we finally got him. And let's take a look at the little cutscene at the end here.
Where the hell are we?
Ugh, why can't we leave this place?
To be continued.
All right, guys, that's it. I know it was a pretty lengthy guide. I wanted to show the entire fight, and I did have a lot to say. I mean, almost 16 minutes straight of good stuff, strategy for you guys to use in the boss fight. I hope it helps you guys. I hope it helps you guys defeat this boss fight if you haven't already. And if you want to see what happened live, I mean, have the live commentary in here. If you haven't already watched it, I'll put a link in the description with the time index so that you can go to our live stream where we actually did this live, because my reaction at the end was pretty awesome. I gotta admit, I was so happy that we actually completed it. So like I said, hope this helps you guys, and I'm sure we'll be back with more very, very soon, guys. I'm sputtering them out.